Hello fellow video game collectors, and welcome to the 5th episode of my quest for N64, where I'm trying to get a complete loose N64 collection. So there are 296 US titles, and I am currently at 167 games, with just 129 games left to go. So number 168 is San Francisco Rush. This is a port of the original arcade racing game, where it still follows the same formula of needing to hit checkpoints throughout the race course before your time runs out. Except now, if the time runs out, you don't have to insert more quarters to try again. This is a high intensity racer, so if your car hits objects at too high of a speed, your car will crash and burn. Thankfully, it's still an arcade racing game, so your car is reset a little further up the track from where you crashed, so you get right back into the extreme racing action. The game features 6 different tracks, plus one more hidden one that you can unlock. Additionally, each of these tracks can be played in either reverse or mirrored modes, giving you up to 21 different configurations to race on. Each track also has plenty of different routes and shortcuts that you can find and take on them, rewarding those who use them by shaving a few seconds off their lap times. Exploring the tracks is also worth your time, as there are hidden keys found throughout the courses that unlock more hidden cars for you to race with. Without using a guide, this will definitely add hours of gameplay in order to find them all. And speaking of cars, there are plenty to choose from. The cars come in various skill levels of beginner, advanced, expert, and extreme.
It's dangerous!
But unfortunately, all of the cars do not handle very well at all. Steering simply sucks and feels like you are driving a semi-truck. I found it rather difficult to control my car well. Overall though, it's still a pretty fun arcade racing game. Number 169 is Batman Beyond. This is a 2.5D side-scrolling beat-em-up based on the cartoon series of the same name. If you're not familiar with the series, it's about a boy named Terry McGinnis who ends up taking over the role as Batman due to Bruce Wayne getting too old for the job. Unfortunately for fans of the show, this is not a very good game. The gameplay is mediocre at best, and combat is very slow and sluggish. Frame rates constantly drop when there are multiple enemies on the screen. The graphics and animations themselves are not great at all. Cutscenes in the game are nothing more than still images with text for dialogue. And perhaps worst of all, the music is very annoying and repetitive. Be prepared to hear the same 10-second loop over and over and over again. As a beat 'em up, the combat is pretty much a joke. The game has different suits for you to switch between. The standard suit gives you a mixture of offensive and defensive measures with some weapons that you can use. The offensive suit has stronger attacks, but your overall defense is much weaker. The defense suit gives you shields to protect yourself, plus a special attack that does massive damage. And finally, the nimble suit allows you to double jump, glide, and perform jumping kicks. At the start of each level, you can choose which suit that you want to start out with, and as you play through the levels, you'll find unlocks that'll give you the other suits to switch between. But honestly, the defense suit is the most overpowered with its special heavy damage attack move. It makes everything incredibly easy to kill. I didn't use any of the other suits except for the nimble suit to perform double jumps during some of the platforming segments. Because of the overpowered defense suit special attack, boss fights are ridiculously easy, making them no challenge at all. It's easy to just walk up to them and spam the special attack over and over again until they're dead. Other enemies die in about 2 to 4 hits of it as well. And speaking of enemies, only 2 enemies will ever attack you at once. When you kill one of them, another one will come out, so you never have to worry about getting ganged up by a plethora of enemies. Enemies also drop health packs, or you can find them in crates throughout the levels, making it pretty rare that you even die. Level design is also pretty terrible. It's nothing more than a joke and is overly simplistic. It's one identical hallway after another. All you do is kill some enemies, get a key, go through a door, and repeat until you get to a boss. And guess what? There's only 5 levels in the entire game, making this a very, very short game to complete. You can probably beat it in about 40 minutes. It took me only 42 minutes to beat the game on my very first try. I died a few times, but I didn't get a game over screen. But if you do get a game over, then you get to start the game all the way over again, as there is no save function. But honestly, it really isn't needed, as easy as this game is. And when you beat the game, there isn't even a credit screen. It just jumps you right back to the main title screen. Even the developers didn't want to be credited with this trash. The game is just not fun and is almost as bad as Superman 64. What happened to our superheroes on the N64? Number 170 is Jeopardy! This is the N64 version of the popular television game show starring Alex Trebek. The game plays exactly like the original game show, where you, as one of the contestants, gets to select questions from various categories and answer them for money. The game features over 4,000 questions among 650 categories, so repetition shouldn't be too much of a problem, except for the fact that the game has no save options. Because of this, you may experience some repeating of questions between game sessions since the game has no way of knowing what you saw the last time you played without a save feature. Before playing, you are able to set up the difficulty of questions that will be selected, as well as the skill level of your opponents, which affects the responses they give to questions. You can also play the game with up to 3 human players instead of computer opponents. Even on easier difficulties, the questions given can still be pretty challenging. The game also has a very nice predictive answering feature that works sort of like autocorrect on a cell phone. As you type an answer, it attempts to give you the rest of the answer so you don't have to type the entire thing in. Unfortunately, however, entering answers is still quite cumbersome using only a Nintendo 64 controller instead of a full keyboard. Now as for graphics, they look pretty rough even for an N64 game. The contestants don't animate or move, they pretty much look like cardboard cutouts. The game does feature some video clips of Alex Trebek, but none of the questions or answers are voiced by him, which is understandable due to the memory limits of the N64. Other than that, there really isn't much sound to the game other than buzzing in, the tap-tap sound of keying in answers, and a few recorded voice prompts by Trebek. In the end, this is still nothing more than a video game version of the game show. Unless you're a big fan of Jeopardy and really want to own the N64 version, you're better off finding a more modern version of it to play. It is also worth noting that this is the last game produced by the developer, GameTech, before they filed for bankruptcy. GameTech was well known for publishing a number of video game adaptations of various TV game shows. Number 171 is Hamm Soccer, which I have complete in the box. As the title states, this is a soccer game for the N64 starring 32 international and 18 US women's soccer teams. When it was released first in Europe, the game was originally called Michael Owen's World League Soccer and featured men's soccer teams instead of women. When the game was ported over to the US, they decided to use women teams instead due to the popularity of Mia Hamm at the time. You can play the game with up to 4 players. It features 4 different game modes: Exhibition, US League Season, World Cup, and Practice. Game settings are configurable for length and other rules that you may want to change. During gameplay, you can perform play substitutions and formation changes, so you can switch assignments and arrange players on the field to your liking. Now as for the gameplay itself, it is pretty poor with very sloppy ball handling and just subpar gameplay in general. The game has 2 modes for ball control, Easy and Professional, but the Professional mode is way overcomplicated to use. The ball physics seem to be pretty spot on when you make contact with it or kick or otherwise hit it. The physics of colliding to other players also seems to be about right. Additionally, the game automatically decides for you which player you are controlling during defense, which is often not the player that you want to be. This alone makes defensive play get really annoying really fast. The AI is also pretty bad, and I didn't notice much change in their patterns when you adjust your team's skill level. Graphically, the game looks okay. Again, this is another game that just doesn't have much sounds either. You're going to hear the whistle, hitting the ball around, the crowd, and the announcer, and that's pretty much it. It's otherwise a pretty quiet game. This game is definitely geared more towards arcade-oriented gameplay, but it suffers a lot from difficult and imprecise handling of the ball. It is a very lackluster title compared to FIFA 98 or other similar soccer games. And then finally, number 172 is Rampage 2 Universal Tour. If you're familiar with the first Rampage for N64, which I've talked about previously in episode 3, then the sequel will feel very similar to you. Rampage 2 Universal Tour is essentially the exact same game as the first, but coated with some new paint and a few extra features. Like the first game, you are able to choose one of 3 new characters to play as, each with slightly different stats. You choose a continent to start on and then go and wreak some damage throughout the world, one city at a time. There are over 100 new levels to play on with a new story. In this game, you're trying to save the original 3 characters from the first Rampage game. Once you save them, you unlock them as a playable character. There are also 2 other new characters that you can unlock as well. Gameplay is still pretty much the same as the previous game, and unfortunately has the exact same pitfalls. Levels get very repetitive and boring fast, especially if you're playing by yourself. This game is much better if you just pick it up, play a few levels, save your game, and come back to it again later, instead of attempting to marathon through it. Additionally, you do not have infinite continues. You only have a limited number of lives, and getting extra lives can take some time to do, either by getting enough points or gaining them through the bonus rounds. It's pretty hard to gain extra lives, so you really have to stay focused on not losing too many. The game is a constant battle to keep your health up, especially when unfair enemies keep respawning despite you killing them over and over again, like the helicopters. Health items can be pretty hard to come by, so a good player must have both good defensive and offensive strategies to maintain their health, while also not wasting too much time. If you take too long to clear a level, planes come by and just do massive damage to you. There's no clock on the screen for this either, and when it happens, you're very likely to end up dying and losing a life. This game just feels too much like the first game. In all honesty, this game should have just been DLC to the original game, but this game was released in a time where there was no such thing as DLC. The game wasn't even sold as a budget title at launch either, but instead at full retail price like any other N64 game. This is unfortunate as the game feels more like a cash grab than anything else. If you're a fan of the previous N64 Rampage game, then you'll probably feel right at home with this one. So that's all I've got to show for today's episode. As always, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, as that always helps me out. If you have anything that you want to say about the 5 games that I showed you today, then be sure to leave a comment down below. And if you're new to the series, then be sure to subscribe so you can be notified of the next episode. And remember, you gotta get the power up to beat the game.